there are people that are entrenched in the mindset that house prices must always go up. Well, that's a very dangerous thing, because that's probably causing us more problems in the long run. You know, a lot of the issues that we've got in the housing market aren't because property's too cheap, it's because it's too expensive. But all the time we keep ramping it northward, we're actually causing more problems than we're fixing.
Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm your host, Michael Dean. You can find me on the internet at property_funder. I've got here with me today Mike Lawler, Director at Integrity Wealth Management, trading as Mortgage Advice Bureau, and Martin Stewart, founder of London Money and author of Goodbye Morecambe.
Thank you very much for bringing that up.
I'll just give a very brief intro to both of them. So Mike's Director at Integrity Wealth Management, which is part of the Mortgage Advice Bureau network. He's got over 15 years in financial advice and mortgage broking. Mike has a deep understanding of how borrowers interact with lenders in practice, and you can expect sharp insights in current buyer behaviour and market realities. Martin is founder of London Money and a long-standing voice in UK mortgage strategy and mortgage advisory. He's also the author of Goodbye Morecambe, which is a gritty working-class love story set in 1980s Morecambe. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Good
research.
Where he grew up. And Martin brings both a street-level view of borrower psychology and a storyteller's flair for the bigger picture. And thanks to ChatGPT for that last sentence.
Right, he wrote the book.
Well, no wonder you got it out so quick. Martin's also been a guest on podcasts before. Mike is a bit of a newbie, but has featured on Martin's podcast in the past, and I think in Martin's own words, Mike is the reason why
we're no longer doing it.
You're no longer doing it. Today is effectively a debate format. So for those of you that are not necessarily following either Martin or Mike on Twitter, Martin and Mike have been having, shall we say, some pretty heated debates about the state of the UK housing market. So it seemed only right to me that I bring them both on the show to have a bit of a natter about it. We're going to try and do it as a two-parter. So yeah, you can expect two for the price of one. So that's something to look forward to. And we're gonna have some good chats. I know that Mike and Martin have known each other a long time. They do get on quite well, so I'm told, despite appearances on the internet. So I think that we'll have a respectful but certainly colourful and heated debate talking about the state of the housing market. Let's just look at some key market themes. Look, nominal house price growth is about 3.5%, but yet the inflation is running at 3.4 to 4%. So in real terms, it's flat, if not negative, real growth. We've got some real regional divergences going on in the market. We've got parts of the northeast declining 8%. I know there were some suggestions I saw from some of your exchanges between each other last week about house prices in London. Rents are flying, going up very high. Strong rental demand, and also not much by way of supply. And then we've got affordability and liquidity matters, and that's something that we need to look into. I guess if we're going to take a starting point, let's go straight into the meat of things. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go with you, Martin, to start with. Is this a crash, a correction, or just a media creation?
Well, I think your very eloquent introduction explains why we're in such a mess, because there are so many different things happening in the housing market at any one time. It could be regionalised, it could be local, it could be macro, it could be micro. And if you try and put a glass over that, you're never going to get it right. It's a fast-moving situation, and it's moving in lots of different directions at different speeds. So when you try and talk about what is the housing market, it's impossible to say. The question is there going to be a crash? Well, a crash is instantaneous. A car crash doesn't happen over 18 months. It's seconds. So there's not going to be a housing crash in that respect. It's not going to happen overnight. It didn't happen in 2007, 2008. That was a 2-year slide into 2009. That's where I think we probably are. In that time, some house prices may go up. Some may stay the same. Some could go down. And that's always going to be my position. There is no everything's going up or everything's going down. There's got to be a middle ground. And that is, it's a fast-moving situation. It's very granular. And it's very difficult to give a prediction, as some people have found out in the industry, Mike.
Yeah, correct.
On both sides of the fence. And the risk with predictions is they will come back and remind you that you made them. And we've all made predictions in the past. The internet doesn't forget. There's always a tweet. There's always a link. There's always a quote in mortgage strategy. And we're doomed sometimes by that. Adam Hosker is a very good example of someone that will go through your social media bins and drag out a quote from 1897 about the state of the housing market. So, it's a fair point, but the problem is the housing market is very different today than it was in 2016, as it was in 2008, as it was from 1986. It's always going to be in a state of flux.
Well, what's your views on that, Mike?
Well, it could be a very short podcast, but yeah.
Well, thanks for coming.
In agreement, different areas are performing differently. I mean, my big thing that I debate people on there all the time, and I've been doing it for over 5 years now, is what I call the property price crash cult. It's very hard to reason with them, and I've been doing it for the last 5 years, that a crash is just around the corner, but there's always something that just keeps putting it off. And I remind everyone, just because I've been right for the last 5 years doesn't mean I'm going to be right going forward. It's a fast moving and changing environment. From the start of this year, I changed my position slightly, because I've been saying to people, look, if you're serious about selling, price really realistically and get it on with a great agent, as if your life depends on it. Because if you're a serious seller, you need a good agent. I think gone are the days where you could go with like a kind of free agent, free estate agent listing, and just, they put the pictures up. You need someone actively trying to sell that property. And if you've got a leasehold flat, wowzers, you're in for some real challenge. But for me, I think it's a tough market at the moment, but I certainly haven't changed my position the whole time since I've been, debating everyone. So I don't see an imminent crash at all. Prices might slide off a little bit. Is that the end of the world? No.
And just for people's context, what part of the UK do you typically operate, and what sort of assets are you arranging finance for?
Yeah. So, and again, I point this out all the time with my tweets. I'm very kind of North London centric. I've got very affluent clients. My typical client, earns over north of 150 grand on our book, kind of, our residential book. 80% of my income is from refinancing people. We do the purchase stuff, but 80% of my income is from refinancing, and our book is like sub 40%. So very affluent North London areas. We look after Martin Gerard. They're probably our main introducer. Quite wealthy clients. So good position to be in for me. So I'm quite fortunate. But
at the same time, certainly our experiences have been that our most active regions, for probably the first time in our 10 years of existence, are not in the south, are not in London. I wouldn't exclude the southeast. The commuter belt's still relatively strong, but certainly London, the performance of London, both the performance of the loans and new business, is definitely been on the downside compared to other regions of the country. So would you say that buyers in London are, certainly your part of North London, are they a bit more reluctant? Are they being a bit tighter with the offers that they're putting forward? 100%. We're seeing kind of a bit of a little disconnect where sellers are still trying to get 2022 prices. So business is good at the moment. I think Martin said that he's up 30% on the year. We're doing similar numbers. It's a good market. There's activity happening, but it's very, very price sensitive. Gone are the days where you could test the market, put it on for a record price. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about sort of Twitter X as well, is that people, I've been saying to people for ages, there is a market and things will sell, and people keep saying, look, this sold for 35% less, but yeah, they went on for a ridiculous price, and it's never 35% less, for example, it's 20%, but they tested the market, for example, 1.1 million on a property that was only ever worth 900, and eventually it sells for 900, and that's the example they use. Oh, look how bad the market is. I'm like, no, they went on with one agent who was willing to to massively overprice for them. I think you've had some examples of that, Martin, where you like to share price adjustments on right move price adjustments, and perhaps I think sometimes maybe not, maybe with the tongue slightly in your cheek.
It's firmly in the cheek.
Trying to suggest the sky was falling on our heads.
But just, I mean, this is probably more the point than the state of the housing market, because we're not in a position, we're not so far advanced in the information curve to be able to fix the housing market. All we're doing is lagging and gossiping about it after the events happen. So Mike talks about his property price cult. What's it called?
Property price crash cult.
Price crash cult, which he's put me in, by the way. I didn't volunteer that. He's made me an honorary member of that. But on the other side of that, I've got the GCHQ, the Grifter Central Headquarters, and that. Between the both of us, what we are explaining there, or actually exaggerating, is the fact that actually we have to pick a camp these days. All right. Now, social media is responsible for that, and this has probably been on the march since 2016 with Brexit, and suddenly you weren't allowed to be nuanced or take a balanced approach. Since Brexit, we've had to choose a side, whether it's left or right, Remain or Leave, pro-lockdown, anti-lockdown, hard left, hard right, and it's now in the housing market. It's either going up or it's crashing. Okay, and as we've sort of already semi-agreed, it's too complicated to put a badge on either side. So if I see someone ramping up the housing market, whether I believe house prices are going to soar or crash, to me is irrelevant. I will prick that bubble with my tongue in my cheek. That is my approach to social media. I like to call it out, and I'll call out both sides more often than not.
I haven't witnessed that. I've generally just witnessed him calling out one side, and he's quite, quite common to call a lot of people grifters. Everyone's grifters, including people who just
I'm a grifter.
Normal working people who just bought the house. It's gone up in value. Apparently, they're grifters.
What's your response to that?
The grifter is more towards the industry, not the consumer, and that's the point I'm picking on. We should be better as professionals in this market to be able to debate it better than we are doing. So there are people on there, and Mike is right. There are people. It's like the Japanese war hero who hid out in the jungle until 1975, convinced the war was still going on. There are people who and we know who they are in the PPCC and are adamant that the market will crash. Well, it can't crash. It's too big to crash. It can slide, it can slow down, it can even go down, but it's not gonna disappear over Beachy Head in one foul swoop. So there are people that are entrenched in that mindset. Conversely, there are people that are entrenched in the mindset that house prices must always go up. Well, that's a very dangerous thing, because that's probably causing us more problems in the long run. A lot of the issues that we've got in the housing market aren't because property's too cheap, it's because it's too expensive. Well, all the time we keep ramping it northward, we're actually causing more problems than we're fixing.
Well, we can touch on that aspect a bit later, but just touching on this point around, I suppose grifters and I'm not necessarily suggesting that this individual is a grifter, but obviously there's the Twitter handle Moving Home with Charlie. We talked about it when you came on last time, and he made a prediction that there would be a 35% nominal fall by 2025. Has he rode back from that, or is he doubled down? Because I feel like he's made a lot of social media capital from that position, from what is quite a big call. I mean, what's your take on that now?
They have not gone down 35%.
No.
At all. Will they? Unlikely. Where I do have a degree of respect for Charlie is he called it early. Where he went wrong is he put a number on it. Now, if he'd have just said what he said 2 years ago about the housing market, the headwinds that were on the horizon, the issues that we may all suffer, the slowdown that may come, the cost of borrowing that was going to increase, the lack of GDP, all those things, and maybe said, up to 10% might be a fair figure, he'd be a national hero. But when you go to an extreme It's like if Mike was going to say house prices are going to go up 35% by 2027, well, we're all just going to sit there and wait for that to happen, aren't we? Because we know it's not going to happen. So the problem with there is he's put a number on it. He'd be a good guest to have on your podcast.
I'd love to have him on.
Yeah, because he is a divisive character. He has got a lot of currency from the position he's taken. Whether that converts into hard cash, I'm not entirely too sure. I think he has a vested interest outside with another property platform that he's trying to build up. And look, we all use social media in some way, shape or form for some gravitas, for some self-branding, for some awareness. So we can't criticise someone for doing that. He's got a good following. He has his detractors. He has his fans. He has people that maybe just appreciates what he does or just watches. He has enemies. People will, you put yourself in the crosshairs, people will try and take you down. That's what we do as a country. We're very good at that. But I admire him. Anyone that is a contrarian thinker and goes out and makes a bold statement, I'll hang around and listen and watch.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I met him a couple of weeks ago. Liked him a lot.
He likes him more than he likes me.
That's probably, yeah, really interesting guy. I mean, he said a couple of outlandish things, whether he believed them or not. It was a basis he's trying to build a following, and he's been very, very successful at building a following. I think you need someone like me, though, who will keep someone, sort of provides a bit of checks and balances. I'm a nightmare for these guys. I'm one of these, a bit like Adam Hosker. I'm bookmarking tweets, saving them. I'm like retweeting stuff from a year ago, saying to people, look, you said this then, is that still your opinion? But it's amazing. Like, even though the facts have gone completely my way, people are still like, no, we're right. they just refuse to admit it. But yeah, Charlie's a super interesting guy. I understand why he said a lot of things. Where I've got respect for him is he puts a lot of thought, effort and time into his arguments. It's not just, right, things are going to crash 35% because, I've put my finger in the sky. He points out a lot of, there's a lot of hardened reasoning behind it. I always try and go back and say, look, the reason it won't happen is because of X, Y and Z. So far X, Y and Z has played out in my favour and we haven't had the big crash you predicted. But who knows what will happen in the future. Labour are trying to do their best with I've always gone, unless unemployment starts ticking up very heavy, I thought that was a big thing that could change it. And with all this national insurance contributions, maybe they can start moving the dial, but hopefully not.
Well, I mean, to your point there, I think you're absolutely right. The unemployment is probably the big. It's probably the factor. It's the sort of elephant in the room, and I do think there is. I do think that people aren't looking at this employment rights bill that's going to come into force next year. The inability to let go of underperforming staff who've not been with you who've been with your firm for 2 years or less, and having to go through effectively a PIP. From pretty much day one, that is going to drive, I think, a lot of employer behaviour that hasn't been considered. And I think more broadly, sort of a general economic malaise as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an uptick in unemployment. I always remember when I was doing my real estate degree, many moons ago, we did an economics module. And an economics module was about the resi market, and we looked at the causes of the early 90s housing market crash, and I guess we probably can call that a crash. And there were two main factors for those that aren't aware. You both will understand this because you raised it. Is fundamentally you've got high unemployment. Unemployment was like 10% or something like that, and then you had double-digit interest rates as well. So that sort of heady cocktail meant that you had relatively expensive mortgages and a lot fewer people who were able to service them. People going into negative equity and all the rest of it. And it took till about 97, 98 for the housing market to sort of right itself. I think if we find ourselves in that situation, then Charlie's prediction probably can come to pass. I just don't think that. I'm just not sure. It doesn't feel entirely likely, but events, you just don't know what events are around the corner.
Correct. We don't know what's around the corner. In some respects, Charlie has got it right, because there are certain properties, whilst it might be a small sample case, that have gone down significantly, whether that's prime central London markets or certain leasehold properties in London. They are looking at significant double-digit drops over time. So he needs some credit for that, because no one saw that coming at all, particularly the oligarchs who bought.
But did he call that out specifically, or is this a case of
that's the problem?
Is that a case of the stop clock?
Generalisation of the market, but within that market, you have those small cogs all working. Some of those have supported his argument. Currently, the majority haven't.
No,
but we can't ignore the fact that in some regard he has been correct.
I was just sorry to interrupt. I was going to say there's been plenty of doomsters out there. I've been debating them on X Twitter for the last 5 years. He's just one of the. But the reason I sort of engage with him the most, he's the most charismatic one, the most fun to engage with. So that's why I engage with him. But he didn't point out any of these, specific.
No, he didn't say certain postcodes.
His was like a national average of 35%. And originally, when I engaged with him, it was 2 to 3 years, and I was like, the guy's just crazy,
Your point, Michael, was we're comparing the late 80s, early 90s with the mid 2020s today, and everything's changed. Demographics have changed, society has changed, economics has changed. So I don't think we can take a lot from back then and try and apply to where we are today. You've got a government now that will do whatever it takes to keep the wheels turning, and we saw that in 2008 with the bailout of the banks. We saw it in 2020 with furlough, bounce back loans, no doubt secret deals behind the velvet curtain to keep businesses afloat. You saw it a couple of years ago just after Trustonomics with the mortgage charter, do whatever it takes to keep people in houses. People back in the early 90s didn't have that. You missed 3 mortgage payments, you're out.
Regulation, obviously, being a big component of that, not being able to repossess for set periods of time.
Well, you speak to some of the lenders, they've said to me that they will do whatever it takes to keep people in their house. If that's a minimum £50 a month payment to keep the lights on, they'll take it. That's a cultural shift massively from the 1990s, where you missed payments after a short period of time, you were done for. 500,000 people or 300,000 people got repossessed back then. And we're looking at very low repossession numbers today. So we have a softer society now in some respects, and that's been underpinned by, you could argue, an overreaching nanny state to ensure that caveat emptor is no longer a thing anymore. I think that's probably where we are right now, which won't help Charlie's argument.
No.
Because if they have to push interest rates back down, that will happen. If you have to turn the printing presses on, that will happen. So we've had personal financial crisis. We've had a corporate financial crisis. It's just whether we get a sovereign financial crisis, and that's the black swan event that may or may not be out there.
This podcast is sponsored by Avamore Capital. Avamore Capital is a development and bridging lender based in London, but lending all over England and Wales, lending on projects from £250,000 all the way up to £25 million on bridging, development, refurb and part complete developments. Please visit www.avamorecapital.com to find out more. Now, the YouTube algorithm doesn't like us getting too political, but but I think we kind of need to touch on this point though, because the government had a bill in Parliament, I think last week, effectively looking to reduce spending, welfare spending, and Labour backbench MPs basically have effectively watered down the proposals. There's clearly a lack of will by the government as a consequence. I mean, there's a will, but I think there's an inability to see it through, to actually balance the books. And some suggestions were that this is actually going to slow the rate of the interest rates continue to fall. Yeah. Is there a bigger concern though, guys, that we have if the government continues to spend beyond their means, that actually that the government's issuing too much debt, and actually the cost of government borrowing starts to spiral because effectively there's just too much of it out there, and there's not enough demand by investors for it. And then I suppose the question that follow-on question from that is, will the government have the firepower to bail out, say, the housing market in, whenever that black swan event comes, like like the COVID, for example? I mean, where do you stand on that?
Well, I think we'll let Mike answer that. He's a socialist.
I have got to hold my hands up. I was like so fed up with the Conservatives after 14 years. I was everyone like, vote Labour, and now I'm like, oh my God. But anyway, so as you say, let's not get too political. But I think we've kicked the can so far down the road, and I think we're just going to keep continuing to kick it down. I think they'll just come up with new ways or new things. It's a bit of a Ponzi scheme. It's a complete Ponzi scheme, and we just need to find a way of letting it go, or just the whole deck of cards falls down. I don't know what happens to society. I mean, I don't like the way society's gone. I think we've gone to kind of two-tier, where either people have got money or they don't have money, and I think that's scary, for how the UK's gone. I think it's going really downhill, and I think we need to find a way of trying to balance that out. How we do it, I just don't know.
Well, that's an interesting point. Interesting point about being two-tier. But is there also an argument to say that we've now got ridiculous number of young people who are working age but not working? So either they're on some sort of sickness or some sort of benefit at the moment, and they're not able. They could work and they're choosing not to. Yeah. They're obviously not featuring in the unemployment statistics as a consequence of that. Do we actually have a worker issue where we've got a large chunk of the workforce that isn't contributing as well? I mean, that also creates a sense of unfairness. Again, probably gone a little bit too political here, but
love it. Carry on. Well, I think there are huge swathes of the UK that are economically unviable, that they don't contribute. Whether that is at the higher end with the ageing population, where people are living longer. I don't know what the numbers are. It's 10 million, I think, or something like that. You've got young kids now who are faced with going to university and coming out with a 2-2 in geography, along with millions of other people with 70 grand's worth of student debt. They may as well have got CMAT. 18. They'd get much better on in life. You've got a huge gig economy. I mean, a lot of these things are actually probably masking true unemployment to a degree.
Yep.
So what? And where does that burden end up? It ends up on Middle England, middle-aged, middle class, via taxation. And that's the problem we've got at the minute, that there's a smaller group being squeezed from both sides. So the point you made previously, Michael, was services are being cut, potentially, or maybe not. But the only way to pay for them is via taxation, which affects affordability and consumer spending, which is why we've got such anemic GDP and have for 15 years. I've always maintained that we're still in the credit crunch. This is just the next phase of it. We're still trying to claw our way out from all of that went wrong before.
I think if you think about just before COVID, I think there was a sort of, interest rates were starting to slowly start to climb back to sort of normality, right? The sort of equilibrium, and then COVID obviously pushed that out. So we've not really had an opportunity to recover from that, and then because of COVID, because of the deficits, we've now got the highest tax burden since the Second World War. So the question, which begs the question, especially in a, like you said, gig economy, we talked off camera about people moving to Dubai, or people being much more fleet of foot. We can't continue. You can't continue to increase the tax burden on the same pool of individuals. You've got to find other ways to live within your means.
Where does that come from without stifling growth? You can't put it on companies. I mean,
they tried that, haven't they?
Mike runs a business, I run a business, you run a business. We've got increased national insurance, we've had increased corporation tax, we've had taxation on dividends from the Osborne era. So that's suppressing that SME engine, which is really important for any economy, has been detrimental to the economy. We have some of the biggest companies operating in the UK not paying tax in the UK. That's been allowed to go on for far too long, in my opinion. You have got the gig economy. You've got a generation of people coming through now, the younger generation, who have been brought up as digital nomads, and they plan to live their life like that. So no longer are we tied to that educate, get into the workforce, buy a house in your 20s, have your family in your 30s. That's all kind of been broken. So someone told me once that you can't break economics, but I'm starting to think we might just have done that. So trying to find the solution that Mike talks about, how you fix it, anyone that can come up with that answer will win the next general election.
But taking that into consideration, what's the long-term implication for the housing market? You've got this, you talk about this demographic shift, you've got 10 million older people, and they're not necessarily being replaced by as many people. Is there we have a housing crisis now. Is there an argument that actually 15, 20 years from now, we aren't going to need as much housing as we have?
Or more. If the population of the UK is growing, maybe we need more housing. Although then we're having a fall in birth rates. But I don't know if that's happening quicker than immigration's happening. So again, it's all a mess. It is all a mess. So an Englishman's home is his castle. All right, that's always been a phrase, hasn't it? All right, it might just end up being we all end up in fortified castles, repelling mortgage brokers, and we could actually become very insular as a result of what's going on right now. We kind of see the bubble of globalization shrinking in front of us, and the world's becoming quite a dangerous place politically out there. And I think countries are turning in on themselves a little bit more now, becoming a bit more introvert. How that will play out, nobody knows. I think the UK for once is right. It is in trouble in many respects. There is no vision, there is no blueprint, there is no plan. I don't know anyone, and I speak to plenty of people, as I'm sure we all do, who is positive about the UK.
Correct. Yeah. Or any of the political parties. That's the big thing, is like, where's the solution out there? Where's the kind of great kind of visionary or thought leaders who are going to get us back on track, get productivity going again? It's a concern. I don't have any of the answers.
And this is where dangerous political factions benefit, where there is uncertainty. They can get in between those gaps and expand them.
Well, sir. Yeah.
Sorry, we're meant to be talking about the housing market.
Yeah, we are.
Mike's took us off track there.
Yeah. Well, look, at the end of the day, the conversations need to be had, right? So,
it was important because it is connected.
It is connected.
If you laid everything out in the old, I think the Duke of Wellington used to do the plus and minuses of something, and whichever was the longer column, that's what you went with. If you did that with the UK, there wouldn't be a lot in the plus column, but an awful lot in the negative column. Well, that should argue that's not positive for the housing market. But then again, we've had so much go wrong in the last 30 years, and the housing market is still active and still strong. So maybe it is immune to everything.
But I suppose you can look at the underlying factors that go into that, which is, over the last 30 years, the cost of borrowing has come down and stayed low. I know we've had for a lot of people, myself included, the idea of interest rates above 1%. Has been a strange anathema to what a lot of my adult life anyway. It's been because of my age, but fundamentally, and we also have we don't have enough housing. We obviously have a shortage of supply. But I think ultimately we've seen successive governments from the Blair era through to George Osborne and beyond, effectively using the UK housing market as the sole driver of the UK economy, and not like almost treating it a bit like a credit card. It was the only way that they could effectively bail the economy out. We need to have. I feel like we've sort of hit the end. Do you feel like we've hit the end of the road with that as an option for governments now to actually get the economy going? They need to find a new solution, because I feel like that's played out.
Just for me, I think they'll still use housing. They'll find another way, whether it's a new stamp duty holiday or something else, to try and kickstart everything all over again.
Yeah.
I say we have a real issue with housing where you've got an older generation. They don't want to move out of their houses. They're living longer. Where people used to get to 60s and 70s and just kind of toddle around. Now you've got some very healthy kind of people in their 70s. If you go to like the David Lloyd, they're all playing tennis to a decent standard. It's very, very different lifestyle, and they're keeping up with the gardens a lot healthier. So we've got a real challenge for getting those people to downsize, free up some of those bigger houses for families. So there's a lot of challenges.
Well, that's actually a question I've got here anyway, which is that, are people staying in homes they've outgrown because the system no longer supports moving?
I think more because they've got families. When they were less healthy, they might want to move from a big house to a flat. Less maintenance and stuff like that. But now, with families bringing them around, people are a lot healthier and living longer, and enjoying their lives. They don't want to move out. So I think for any equity release mortgage brokers out there, I think that's a good place to be, because I think that market's going to grow and grow and grow over the coming years.
So you think that actually the downsizing is downsizing dead then? Is that your call?
Because of the cost, the estate agents, the stamp duty moving, unless they do something with that, downsizing is going to be, there's not a lot of people going to be doing it, in my opinion.
There is definitely a demographic time bomb. There's not enough people paying in, and far too many people taking out. There's another big debate on social media about, is the state pension a benefit? And it's not. People think there's a magic pot that they put their national insurance in, and that's got their name on it, so that when you get to 67, that comes out. It's not. It's just literally paying for everything today to keep the wheels turning. Yeah. So there is not enough money going in. Younger people aren't paying in. They're not committing to the UK. That's not going to help us at some point in the future. Mike's point is, everyone is so much healthier now. When you look back to when you were 20, anyone that was 60 looked like Father Christmas. Old and knackered. Now they're living the time of their lives. Anyone that's met Stoney at 68 will know that. He's partying like Keith Richards. The issue about the downsizing is relevant. It is very expensive to buy and sell houses now, and that is restricting people moving. We've got a client, Mike will see loads of these. Someone's moving from an 800 grand house to 1.2. Sounds exotic to someone living in Rotherham hearing this, but that's quite a normal London transaction. Right. It's £100,000 in buying and selling costs for that move. My first flat I ever bought was £72,000. So now it's cost more than my first house ever cost me in order just to move, and that's just to gain one extra bedroom and a small courtyard garden. So you've got that issue. The other thing that is affecting this demographic time bomb is, people are healthier now, but at some point you've got kids staying at home longer. Okay, that doesn't contribute towards a downsize or a move. You can't get rid of the kids anymore. Used to be able to, but now they're staying forever. And then you've got the older generation, and whilst they might be physically fit, there is a dementia problem in the UK. Okay, so this inheritance that a lot of Middle England are expecting that's going to filter down to them at some point is going to get swallowed up on long-term care. And I know people that are spending, families that are spending £12,000 a month to house their mum and dad in a nice care home, but not a special care home, out in the southwest, not even in London. And that's now. So what was that going to be in 10 or 15 years' time? So again, all this goes into the mix, which suggests that if we keep on doing what we keep on doing, we'll keep on getting what we've got. And right now, there is no blueprint. Mike is right. We are kicking it all down the road. Arguably, we have always kicked it down the road since the day we crawled out of the sea. We'll keep just pushing it and let someone else sort it out for us, which is fine until you run out of road. And that's the question we have to ask ourselves now. This road, or the road for the last 25 years, has been built on debt. All right. And I think the risk there is we've normalised debt individually, corporate and government. Okay. And the music stopped, hasn't it? As you said, the music stopped when rates went above 1%. They kept rates too low for too long. They should have been putting them up in 12, 13, 14, not wait until 22, 23. So we've got a society that has normalised itself on debt, and the cost of debt now is remaining higher for longer. That will suffocate growth, suffocate ambition, and stop people moving, which will add to the decline of the country as a whole. Does it feel like we're progressing? Our income's probably gone up, our turnover's gone up. Does it feel like we're better off? Are we progressing? When we see credit reports that run to 100 pages, because it's got Klarna on it.
Yeah.
You know,
well, that regulation.
Takeaway via debt. A takeaway used to be a treat. Still is in my head.
I did see that on Uber Eats, and like, yeah, you can pay for your takeaway with like Klarna I'm like, what?
But just think about it as well, Michael.
Nuts.
Virtually every car you see on the road is now financed. Most people's watches are financed. All our phones are financed.
Yeah.
Our houses now are financed. Everything is on the tick.
Yeah, and you sort of feel like it's like a sort of, you only need one domino to fall, don't you? And then, and then it can unravel really quickly.
Well, can you identify what that domino is?
Well, that's a very good. It's a very good question. It could be Charlie. Well, it's a funny one. It's a funny one because you can, a bit like when we were talking about, you can see a world where Charlie's prediction,
an Armageddon,
could come. But if you think 35% nominal, that probably takes half of the UK housing stock into negative equity.
If we had, because of all those reasons we just talked about, over-leveraged everywhere. Don't forget, in 2007, when we came out of the credit crunch, the mantra was we're going to deleverage. The consumer, businesses and governments were going to deleverage. Well, that never happened. It's got worse.
Yeah.
So, yes, there is an apocalypse-type situation where you might end up with house prices collapsing 35%. If that happened, house prices would be the least of our concerns.
Oh, for sure.
We'll be fighting each other over a dead badger for lunch.
And this is what the property price crash cult don't understand. They think, prices like absolutely collapsing would be great news for them. They'll finally be able to buy, but they don't understand how economics works. So,
but then you might end up with the phrase of "you'll own nothing and be happy," which keeps filtering and lingering around post-COVID. That I'm not saying as a conspiracy theorist that's going to happen, but it might edge towards that, where the government will yet again step in to reinvent that wheel to give society a hope of limping on whilst they keep building the road to kick the tin down.
Without putting on tinfoil hat, do you feel like there is an element of that already at play, where, and not necessarily a government owning it, but big corporations? You look at, you got build to rent and co-living for younger people on the housing side, on the flat side, and then you've now got the same happening with with housing estates purely for rental, and then like you said, everything's on finance. Everything's. I mean, I speak as someone with two leased cars. Yeah. I don't own any of my cars, and which I'm fine with.
Tax deductible.
Yeah. Well, one is. One is. Thank you, Boris. And you sort of as you go, and then you look at the change. What's happening potentially with farms. You're seeing corporations buying farmland, and is there some of those conspiracy theorists would be forgiven for jumping to that conclusion, wouldn't they?
Especially what's happening with AI and how that could affect jobs, that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of people that are talking about, people will just be supported by universal credit. And I know it sounds a bit Black Mirror-ish, but it's not without the realms of possibility.
Yeah, that is you'll own nothing and be happy. Yeah. We will support you for a minimum type of lifestyle, and you go and do what you want. But there's no job for you at the end of it, and arguably no housing at the end of it, but we'll give you shelter. So that is the tinfoil hat extremities of that scenario playing out. I think your point, Michael, is correct, and I've said this for a while. I think we'll end up with 10 businesses running the world in some way, shape or form. I was out on a boat with an IFA the other day that Mike and I know, and there's someone there that works for the drinks, a drinks company, and he was saying how much trouble that industry is in. People aren't drinking as much. Demographics are changing the way we address our alcoholic intake, and they're saying all that's happening is big businesses are just buying up the smaller ones. So I think we'll end up with just big businesses driving everything at the expense of innovation and SMEs. AI will contribute massively to that.
I think, as someone who's building a technology platform within our business, and we're not a fintech, but we're sort of on the road to becoming a fintech, and it's it takes a particular set of skills. You also have to have the capital to build something like that. I think ultimately you are going to have that kind of, we're going to have we already have a society of haves and have-nots. I think that's just going to become much more extreme.
Yeah.
And the worrying thing is because of the power of AI, you can have the wealth and the power. It's not even like an 80-20 split. It's like a
95-5.
It could be even like 99-1. Because if you know how to harness AI and you know how to put it into effect, at the moment you still need people to take advantage of the AI tools that are out there. Pretty soon you'll have AI tools driving other AI tools, and effectively you just need one puppet master in a business or an industry. It's very dystopian. It is a bit Black Mirror-ish, and we're probably catastrophizing a little bit. But this scenario where we do have this kind of, where we need, I do understand. I think it's when I first worked out coding, and I was using ChatGPT to help me with it. It was like there was a light bulb moment. I was like, I think we are going to need this universal basic income. I do think there's a strong risk of that. But it's funny, we've talked about predictions from the start of this podcast, and we could very, 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 very easily be wrong.
Yeah.
Or equally right. And that's the problem, is that the truth, and this is the thing about the debates that I have with Mike and Charlie and anyone else that wants to pile in on those late night Twitter extravaganzas. The truth actually isn't in Mike's chair or in my chair. It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's what you get with extremities. It's just an extreme opinion, but it's not necessarily the truth or accurate. A combination of what Mike says, a combination of what I say, a little bit of what you say, and a bit of what Charlie say, put that in the middle, and you'll probably find something more relevant that we can work with.
Yeah, but that doesn't drive clicks though.
No.
That's boring.
It doesn't. Well, if anyone's making money out of clicks right now, I'd like to make them.
The only thing I think that's kind of disappointing with stuff is that we've got to a situation like, I think Martin touched on it, like since Brexit, where no one can admit they were wrong anymore. No one can just hold their hands up and say, yeah, you got me. I was quite wrong on that. I've had all sorts of debates on Twitter, like about HS2, with people that said it wouldn't go over budget and it was great. And even when it was like going massively over budget, it's because I used to live in Ickenham, which was really affected by HS2. So I had a lot of intel on it and knew people that were working on the project and had some quite debates on it. And I'm annoying. I can be a bit of a twat. I was going back to people and saying, look, I told you this would go over budget. And they were still like, no, let's wait until it's completely finished. Then we'll be able to say it's gone over budget. And I was like, yeah, just insane.
Well, an infrastructure project in the UK not going over budget. I mean, seriously.
Exactly.
They built something like 20,000 miles of rail track in China in the time we've tried to get 30 miles up to Wickham.
And this was my big thing against the Conservatives, that they were just too corrupt. They wouldn't be able to manage a project like that. So,
what's your take on? I mean, what's your take on social media more generally, though? Do you feel like the two of you obviously have very healthy debates between you, but you manage to keep it civil outside of that and retain friendships? For me, it's for me, it's the mark of an intelligent person that they can, it's like my view is like when the facts change, my opinion changes.
Yeah.
What is it about today's social media landscape that people seem to, they're unwilling to move from these entrenched views and opinions?
Even after they're wrong. This is the
ego,
process.
isn't it? Ultimately,
Yeah.
what it boils down to. Everyone wants to be right and nobody wants to be wrong. Well, social media is a very big magnifying glass to put that under. And it doesn't forget, and it's a very unforgiving place, which is why really you shouldn't take it that seriously. And I'd like to think that on the whole we don't. There are elements of it that are really, when it first came out, I was a reluctant adopter of it. But after a while, actually, it was quite good, and there's lots of information there. It shrunk the world, so it broadened our horizons and our knowledge base as a result of that. Then it became divisive, argumentative, and then a platform to push narratives. I don't think it's quite recovered from that. I don't think it will go back to what it used to be, which was a useful source of content and a way of engaging with people that you wouldn't normally meet in your day-to-day life. What used to be good, and it'd be great to get back to this, people used to do what they used to call tweet-ups, where actually the people that you're debating and we're throwing hand grenades at each other over the wall continually, we go, I tell you what, just go to the pub and we'll have a chat. And we used to do that, and 30, 40 people would meet up in a pub. These people, these strangers that we've met online, and as you'd expect, they're very different in real life. And actually, there's a more common ground once you meet these people than there are fighting over algorithms, thinking you're getting your point across when you're not. And that, I think we have talked about this. There is probably a little 10 to 15 group of individuals. Some are in the PPCC, some are in GCHQ. Getting 15 of those people in a room together over a beer, we'd have a right laugh, I reckon. That doesn't mean to say that when we go back on Twitter, we're not arguing about the same things again, but it will be arguably slightly more intellectual and more understanding of the other person's position, and knowing that actually I've met that guy who's all right.
I think I made the point, like when I met moving home with Charlie, very interesting guy. He's got 3 kids, homeschooling them. He can fly a plane. So very, very interesting guy. Great to have a beer with. So I think more often if we can meet face to face and have a beer, just because we argue on one single topic, we might agree on 99 others. So if we can meet up for a beer, it's much better. You got to get Adam Hosker, who's mentioned.
He's not allowed to leave Yorkshire, apparently.
He's one of my favourites as well. But
I follow Adam, and I certainly know you, him and Martin. Go hammer and tong.
Adam is good value. People naturally, I'm sure people, Mike's had this. People will slip into your DMs and go, "Why do you hate Adam so much? What have you got against Seb? These are good people, all right? And I've met Adam, and I know Seb, and I know Mike socially as well. I'd never hate them. Hate's a strong word, and people bandy it around too much now. It's important to have healthy conversations, respectful conversations, even if you just end up agreeing to disagree.
Yeah, 100%. So me and Adam, obviously, we're on the grifter,
the grifter
price, but we disagree massively on politics.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to agree with everyone on every subject. And it's quite fun to debate stuff, and you just have to give up with Adam in the end because he's got so much.
Won't stop.
He's just got so much on you. It's like you've changed your opinion since 2014.
Well, we've established you're not allowed to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not online.
Back in 2014, you attacked this person.
I'm sure he sits outside our house, with binoculars, just watching us. That's commitment, isn't it?
Right. Well, I think on that bombshell, I think we're gonna call an end to part 1. So thanks to Martin and Mike. If people want to get hold of you on the internet or otherwise, what's the best way of reaching out?
You'll end up in a bare knuckle fight with Lewis. I'm at London Money FS is my X handle.
And
Mortgage Mike N2, because the office used to be based in East Finchley, but we're just moving to Barnet, so I need to get that one changed.
Yeah, Mortgage Mike Barnet doesn't quite have the same ring to it. And I've been Michael Dean. You can find me on the internet at property_funder. Thanks very much. We'll be chatting to Martin and Mike again in part 2 next time. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.